We are continuing this month in our theme, which is students and teachers. A lot of us have that ability to be a student and a teacher, invariably, throughout our lives, day in and day out. That's what we are doing. And I'd like to, again, bring up some of the teachers that we've experienced in our religious science movement and highlight them. In particular, Ernest Holmes was the founder of religious science. And Ernest Holmes was a quite unique individual, had a curiosity about him, and insatiable, really, from the time he was little. He was always asking questions, always wondering what's going on in life. And he read the writings of Socrates, Jesus, Buddha, Phineas Parker's Quimby, Judge Thomas Troward, Emerson, Freud, Einstein. These were his interests. And he just delved into it there. And he was a people person. He wanted to be with you. He'd like to know what you were thinking, what do you want in life, and how were you getting it? What was happening with you? He also, from what I understand, most likely had a photographic memory, because he could all these insatiable readings that he read, was able then to prolifically write, prolifically speak, and he would be able to espouse and quote word for word all sorts of different people that he had read, their quotes word for word, just off the top of his head. That is something to be admired. As a speaker, I'd like to be able to do that. But I have these copious notes in front of me when I want to quote something. And as a matter of fact, I want to quote one of the things that he said right here. He said, "As we better understand love, our spiritual aspirations blossom. As we better understand natural and spiritual law and how we influence our life with our world, we will pay closer attention to what inspires us. We are creative in and through all facets of our being." So he's reminding us that we are a creative being. We all are. That's our nature. We can't help it. We continually create because that's what we are made of. And how do we do that? How do we create things? Through our thought. Begins in that unseen realm, in that spirit realm. What we're thinking is the initial concept of what we are creating in our lives, followed by our words, followed by our actions. Correct? One of the major points that we want to include in how we create our lives is not just about what we think and our words and our actions, but there's a little nuance that you want to make sure you slip in there. And that is, what do you believe? You can say and think all the words you want to say all day long, but if you don't believe that it's possible, that it's going to happen, you don't have it. So we go back to the time and time again as to what is it I really believe. And the important thing to recognize is that we're creative beings all the time, right? And so it would behoove us all to think about what it is we want. Right? Because we can think about what we want, and we can give ourselves that energy of acceptance of it. We can feel, oh my gosh, yes, I'm going to win one of those raffle baskets. We state our word, we set our intention, we feel the feeling. And when we do that, our hearts respond with joy because we've accepted it. It's done. It's a done deal. Thank you, God. It's all one big fell swoop. correct? And so when that's how we create. Well, and that's a good thing. Like attracts like. On the other hand, we can think about what we don't want. And we can give it all that energy of visualizing it, of experiencing it in our heart, going, oh, ugh. And what happens? Jonah said it. What I feared the most has come upon me. We will draw and that experience to us because that's what our energy level has been creating. This law, this thought process that we have and our feeling process that goes into it, this law that it goes into is impersonal. It doesn't stop and say, by the way, are you sure that's what you want? This law knows not what we want or what we don't want. This law responds to what we are interested in. What we are interested in. If you find yourself interested in something that really is a negative, is kind of pulls you down, well, stop and realize. Do I really want to think about that? Do I really want to say these words? Because the universe is going to say yes. Ernest Holmes said, what we affirm is this, that there is a spiritual presence in the universe which manifests itself through the object to which we give our attention. And it manifests itself at the level of our own consciousness about that thing to which we give our attention. What we are interested in at the level of our consciousness. Our consciousness is our whole being. We can interest ourselves in a soap opera, in a murder mystery. And life will say yes. We're going to give you more of that. How many of you are reading The Science of Mind magazine this month? It's fabulous. Most of them are quotes from Ernest Holmes, and a couple of the readings, I've turned down some of the pages. You know, I'm going to hang on to this one. But his quote from yesterday in there said, in the mind of God, there is a correct mold, the true knowing. But in the mind of man, there is not always this true knowing. I'm going to interject something here. That's because we separate ourselves. We do that. Since God can do for us only by doing through us, nothing can be done for us unless we are positively receptive. But when we realize the law and how it works, then we will provide that complete inner acceptance, i.e., it is done unto you as you believe. That's me. Well, that's Jesus, actually. By doing so, we permit the Spirit to do the work to make the gift. The reason we can make our requests known with thanksgiving is because we know from the beginning we are to receive. Therefore, we cannot help but be thankful. And Jesus' Master was a great example of that. One of the first things he did whenever he wanted to have some sort of a demonstration, he thanked. He was so grateful that it is done. One of the first things. So we are in and of this God energy and presence. Always, eternally. It is for us, and it wants us to do and be and express more and more of what we are. I want to read you a note that God wrote. I got it this morning. It says, "Good morning. This is God. Today, I will be handling all of your problems. Please, remember, I do not need your help. If life happens to deliver a situation to you that you cannot handle, do not attempt to resolve it. Kindly put it in the SFGTD, something for God to do, box. It will be addressed in my time, not yours. Once the matter is placed in the box, please do not hold on to it or remove it. Holding on or removal will only delay the resolution of your problem. If you need to contact me, I am only a prayer away. Please, have a nice day. God. Isn't that so? So many times we have these consternations, we have this problem, we have this issue, and then we pray, God, help me out here. And then what do? We take it right back. We don't put it in the box. We don't forget about it. We don't let it go. We think that we've got to, do it. Not always. You need to make your request and be patient time and time again. Even when all the raffle tickets are called, you can still win. As I wrote in the thought for the week, there is a knower, a power and a presence that is beating our hearts and breathing our breath. Why not avail ourselves of its wisdom? Set the intention to be pliable, flexible, and teachable. Be open and receptive to divine inspirations, and then take a step in that direction. Be available to let yourself go with the flow of life, for it is giving you everything you have need of at every moment. Release and let go of the habits, the resentments, the disappointments, and the attitudes that pull and weigh you down. Free yourself and free others. Life is for living. Let it be sweet. So that brings me to our topic this morning, which is to be in the flow. We can be in the flow of life, and we can check in to life, or we can check out of life. Our choice. How do we check into life? Checking in is being available, being expectant, thinking about what we want. Checking out of life is sitting in front of the TV, being mesmerized, or doing whatever things that numb our emotions, that numb our minds, to check out. So we want to be in that flow, in that moving flow. I shared with you that I did have my 50th high school reunion this last weekend. And Friday night, there we had like a little mixer, and then on Saturday, last night, we had the dinner. And it was interesting because they give you a name tag, which has the original name, like if you were, before you were married, and then your photograph from the high school yearbook on it. That way, when you looked at somebody, everybody was like going, "Oh yeah, I remember you." Yeah, and so at the mixer, it was interesting because I'd see somebody and I'd see their picture, and especially a couple of the guys. I mean, I knew they were in my class, but I never really talked to them, But for whatever reason, we sat there and we stood there and we started chatting. Well, this one fellow had told me, what have you done with your life? 50 years. What have you been into? He said, well, I didn't know what I was going to do when I graduated from high school, so I went into the Navy, and I became a corpsman. And when I got out of the Navy, then I took some more classes and ended up being a nurse practitioner. And he says, today I'm a physician in a hospital at the ER room. That's what I've been doing for several years now. And he said, but at the beginning, I don't know, I just kind of just went with the flow of, what life was bringing me. And I said, that's how I got to be a minister. I was just kind of going with the flow of, what things were coming up at me at the time. There was also another fellow, again, that I recognized his picture, but, I hadn't really had any contact with him in school per se, other than I recognized him. Well, we started chatting, and he's telling me what he's been doing, and then I said, well, I'm a minister of a religious science church, and I started to explain what a New Thought church is. What is that, New Thought? And I started explaining. He goes, oh, I go to the biggest one in the world. I said, do you go to Mile High Church? I absolutely do. I run the youth program there. I run the men's group there. I've been doing it for years. So, he didn't have to be schooled on, our teaching. He knew exactly what I was talking about. And another gal walked up, and she didn't even have a name badge on. I didn't know who she was. Well, as it turns out, she was actually a guest of somebody else that was in our class, but she was in the class behind ours. She started coming on the conversation, and I'll tell you, she was right there in the mix of it. She knew exactly what metaphysics meant. And, I mean, the three of us just had this great conversation about what metaphysics and this and that. I'm thinking, wow, how did we attract each other here? Spirit attracts. Like attracts like. And we just had a great conversation, and just recognizing that, you know, what we are and how we become to be who we are is all good. It's all good when we can just let go of the consternation. I don't know why, as I drove to both events, both on Friday night and on Saturday, as I'm driving, I'm like all nervous. I don't know why. I don't know why I was doing that. As soon as I got there, I was fine. You know, but then it was interesting because at the end of the whole event last night, we had a very nice time. You know, we chatted with more people, and we did this at a nice dinner. And at the very end, they wanted to sing the alma mater. And they were having difficulties with the accompaniment. And they said, well, I don't know, I guess, you know, we're just going to have to just wing this. We don't seem to have the music for it. Can anybody come up here and lead us in the alma mater? Well, it's funny because they were going around the room. They were doing these little DVDs. They asked people to talk about, you know, what you've done in your life and this and that and the other thing. And so they did this DVD beforehand. And they said, how have you changed from the time that you were in high school to today? How have you changed? I said, oh, when I was in high school, I was demure and quiet and reserved. And I think I've changed. So, of course, when they ask, you know, who wants to come up here and lead us in the alma mater, I can do that. So, and I learned that every time we sang it in school, they would start it on this really high note. And, I mean, I could sing it, but most other people couldn't because it went way out of their range. So I made sure I started it as low as I could. And so we did a good job. We did a good job on that. So it was a great event, and we're looking forward to our next one. I guess they're having it in 5 years. So that's what's happening. So it's a fun thing. If you have a reunion coming up, remember to go, you know, and support it and organize it if you want. They told us the gal that's going to organize the next one, who she is in 5 years. Going to do another one, 55th anniversary. And I talked to her later. She was a neighbor of mine. And I said, Sally, you know, so you're going to do the next one. She goes, yeah, I'm not quite sure how that happened. Well, obviously you must have planted the seed somewhere, and somebody now spoke the word. So you're in the mix of it. As I was reading, the reason I got this message this morning, in the flow, was something that I saw written by Eric Butterworth. Anybody know who Eric Butterworth is? He is the Unity minister. He was a Unity minister, and his bio read, Eric Butterworth was the minister at the Unity Center of Practical Christianity in New York City from 1961 to 2003. He held Sunday services at Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center, attended by thousands. His daily radio programs were broadcast before the internet throughout the United States and Great Britain, Europe, Africa, and the Isles of the Caribbean. Dr. Mila Angelou says of Eric, he had been, is now, and shall forever be my teacher. The unique spiritual bond that existed between Eric and Maya is evident to all who knew them. So Eric tells this story, this personal story, and I thought that it was poignant to share it this morning because it goes with the flow of our topic. He was flying from the West Coast to the East Coast, and he had to be transferred in Chicago. How many of you have ever been transferred in Chicago and run into difficulties? So his flight was suddenly canceled. And not only that, but 2 other flights in Chicago were also canceled. So there were hundreds of people milling around, wanting to get on to what they wanted to get to, and this and that, and there was anger and frustration and, just a bunch of upheaval. And he was frustrated, too, because he really needed to get out of there. So in his frustration, he remembered a statement of Edwin Markham that he had often used to help himself. And it said, "When you are the hammer, strike. When you are the anvil, bear." In other words, if there's something you can do, do it. And if there's nothing you can do, then just let it happen. Bear with it. Go with the flow on it. And so he realized there's nothing he could do. This is happening, and I'm just going to be able to wait and sit it out and see what goes on. And he was aware that there was another man in the room that wasn't arguing he was very calm. He was sitting there by himself, seemed serene and calm. So Eric Butterworth sat down next to him, and they started chatting. And he said, "You seem so secure and serene. How are you doing that?" He goes, "Oh, I haven't always been that way. You see, I spent a year in a sanitarium, and I had much time to think about things. It was a great growth experience, during which I made a covenant with the flow of life within me. And I learned that the goal of life is to let God express at all times, regardless of the circumstances. And I have resolved never to let things that happen around me or to me overshadow the dynamic presence of God within me. I've found that outer things always come to pass, but the inner power goes on forever." And so the two of them were sitting there calmly talking and having a nice conversation. And then there was an announcement was made by the airline that in order to do things right, they only had one plane, and they had three different people, three different planes that they needed to get on one plane. So to do the fair thing, we're going to draw numbers, draw straws, draw names. And after all the pressuring and demanding and threatening, and most of the passengers, Butterworth's quiet friend was the first called, and Butterworth was the second called. It was a great lesson in letting go. Our teaching is very practical. We learn and we apply what we learn, and we allow our lives to be a demonstration of the divine in experience. When we know who and what we are within ourselves, and we know who and what everything and everyone is around us, that is what we see with a single eye. That is what we create in our lives. So I'm going to ask you to think about what you want. Accept it. See it as happening. Believe it. Speak it with your words, with your body language. If there's something that you can do, be the hammer and do it. If there's something that there is nothing you can do at this moment, put it in the God box. Be patient. Be the anvil. Bear. Because the good will ultimately be revealed in our lives. That's what we're here to do, I think, is to go with the flow of life and enjoy it. And so it is. Namaste. Bless you.